7:05, I call the Hooksett Public High School Information Evening to commence. If you could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I would like to thank all of you for coming this evening. I'm going to turn over to Dr. Littlefield, who's going to make the presentation. Thank you very much for coming this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, as we begin, just a couple of housekeeping things. We do have the MOUs. What the heck is an MOU? By the time you leave here tonight, you'll know. But we do have them being displayed on these monitors. We have hard copies of the MOUs available over at the table. For those of you who might be unable to see, because you're way up there, you have instruction, we do have iPads, and this presentation is on those iPads. So we want to make it as easy as you can to follow. The format for tonight is 4 or 5-fold. I'm going to provide you with some information. I'm going to answer questions that I can answer administratively. Remember, I just work here. Then I'm going to turn it over to the board chairperson. And I assume that the board would welcome questions from parents. And then we should be able to wrap up with your being able to provide meaningful input to the board on issues that may be concerned with you regarding high school or things that come up during the presentation. So 4 things. If I present, I'll answer the administrative questions. I'll turn it over to the board. There will be board questions, and there'll be input from the public in terms of things the board should know from its constituents. Make sense? I got a question for you, though. I have 2 questions, though, that I need to answer before I begin to help me with my presentation. How many of you are anxious about high school placement? Me too. Me too. But I can assure you of one thing. I'd like to be delivering more to you tonight, but I'm going to tell you what I have to deliver. I'm going to tell you what I don't have to deliver, and I will assure you of this: nothing's more important to me than your kids. I have another question for you. How many of you would like your high school student to go to, and this will help me during my presentation, how many of you would like your high school student to go to Londonderry High School? How many of you would like your youngster to go to Bow High School? How many of you would like your youngster to go to, I haven't asked the question yet. You can't go to all of them. How many of you would like your youngster to go to Pembroke Academy? How many of you would like your youngster to go to Manchester Central or West? How many of you would like your youngster to go to Pinkerton Academy? Woo! How many of you would like your youngster to stay in the 8th grade at Colley and See, I know what questions to ask. That's important to me, and I think that should be important to the board in terms of structuring what we present to you and structuring some of our responses to questions that you may have. So we developed a concept about high school that, by the way, meets the needs, conceptually meets the needs of everybody here. And it looks something like this. This is the concept that we've been working on. And essentially, we've developed some vocabulary of our own. And in this concept, I broke my presentation already. In this concept, Pinkerton Academy is what we're calling the anchor school. Under this concept, Pinkerton Academy would be our high school. However, there would be the opportunity for parents to choose Londonderry High School. There would be the opportunity for parents to choose Bow High School. There would be the opportunity for parents to choose Pembroke Academy. And those choices would be governed by contracts with those school systems that are called, not that we call them, Memoranda of Understanding, MOU. Okay? So Pinkerton, conceptually, we were thinking of that being our anchor school, a school that we would have a tuition agreement with. Now, I've used two terms, tuition agreement, memorandum of understanding. They are different. And so help me, I will leave here, before I leave here tonight, you will understand the difference between the two. And then tell me. So we've got Londonderry, Bow, Pembroke Academy as choices, governed by a contract called a Memorandum of Understanding. We have Pinkerton Academy as our anchor school, our main high school, and because of an agreement that was struck with Manchester, we have a pen that's not working. We have Manchester, Central, and West as alternatives. So you remember when I started, I said, "You anxious?" You went, "Yeah." I went, "How many want to go to London? How many want to go to Pinkerton? How many want to go to Pembroke? How many want to go to..." And you all like raise your hands. This concept gives everybody what they want. You feel better? No? Now, let me get into some of the specifics, because you should know that I mentioned that okay, I just did that to draw it because my pen wasn't working. A memorandum of understanding. You know, why is there the difference between the two? Why would you do an MOU with what we're calling the three satellite high schools, anchor school, three satellite high schools? Why would you do a memorandum of understanding with the satellite high schools? For a number of reasons. Well, what does that memorandum of understanding do? What's the purpose of an MOU? What does that contract do? Number one, it identifies the number of students that a receiving school district would take. You negotiate that number. The second thing that it does is it establishes a term. 1 year, 5 years, 6 years, 4 years. It establishes an enrollment process. And I will tell you this, that as we have been talking to other school districts, parents have indicated to me a concern about what they've called, their term, not mine, cherry picking of students. Ain't gonna happen. Choice is choice. Youngsters, if we're going to provide youngsters with choice, they're going to have the choice of the high school they're going to attend. And nobody's going to accept the best and the not the best. You know why? I have 4 kids. If they were cherry picking, my youngest never would have gone to high school. So that's unacceptable. So the MOUs that we've been looking at avoid that cherry picking, but the enrollment process is part of what an MOU does. It establishes the tuition. The receiving school district agrees to take a certain number of youngsters and to accept them in a certain way for a certain amount of money. I will tell you this comes with experience. Those other people are not hungry. They know what they want for tuition. They're not hungry for tuition dollars. An MOU will define what we call supplemental expenses. If a youngster requires some service above and beyond the typical high school youngster that costs the receiving district money, then an MOU will define how those extra services get paid for. And lastly, it defines a payment schedule. So an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, is a relatively simple contract that defines the number of students that a receiving district will take. It defines the term of the contract, the enrollment process, the way in which tuition will be calculated, what supplemental tuition would look like, and a payment schedule. That's an MOU, and when we were thinking conceptually, we were thinking in terms of an MOU for Bow, Londonderry, and Pembroke. And if you can make any sense of all my lines, good luck to you. A tuition agreement, which is what we would be looking for here. A tuition agreement differs from a memorandum of understanding in many ways. It has all the elements of a memorandum of understanding, all those things that I talked about, but in addition, a tuition agreement is not only a commitment of a receiving school district to accept students. It is a commitment on the part of the sending school district to send students. See, it ratchets it up. A tuition agreement ratchets up the agreement a little more, so there are commitments on both parts. With an MOU, the sending district, which is us, there are very few commitments that we have to make. But when you get into a tuition agreement, there are commitments. The minimum of the minimum duration of a tuition agreement is 10 years. As I said, there is no, if you just indulge me, all these silly lines that I drew, I was just playing with the thing, and now it's confusing me, which is very easy to do. Okay, is that better? All right. So the big difference, commitment on both sides, 10-year minimum. An MOU can be 1 year if you want it to be. I don't know why you want it to be 1 year. I certainly would want it to be guaranteed that kids who start will be able to graduate. So it should be at least a 4-year commitment. A tuition agreement needs to be approved by voters. Well, why is that? Because you are making a commitment as a community. We will send 100 students every year. We will send 150 students, we will send all of our students for a certain tuition amount. That's committing the community financially. And only the voters can commit the community financially. So a tuition agreement does have to go before the voters, basically because there are financial commitments. Quite often, a tuition agreement will contain language in it regarding representation, like the sending school district. What voice do I have in what happens in that other school district? In the case of the Pinkerton Academy tuition agreement, that would include representation of 2 Hooksett residents on the Pinkerton Board of Directors. In the case of our agreement with Manchester that's been in place and will continue, that provides membership on a variety of decision-making committees. A curriculum and instruction committee, a budget committee, an athletic committee, and so forth. A tuition agreement needs to be approved by the State Board of Education. And finally, a tuition agreement establishes that high school as a high school maintained by the sending district and allows the sending district to assign students to that high school. Does that make sense? No. The final thing that a tuition agreement does is it makes the receiving high school, Hooksett High School, and allows the school board to assign youngsters to that high school, meaning next year our kids are going to that high school. That's not what you said before. Yes, it is. I said that's what a tuition agreement does. I said that conceptually we're trying to mix tuition agreements with MOUs to provide the maximum amount of choice to our community. Now, that's the concept. That concept has so many moving parts to it. There's really negotiations taking place, and we're dealing with 5 different entities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. With different needs. And it has become a very complex process and a very time-consuming process, taking much more time than I think that we envisioned. So, as we sit here tonight, we have had some difficulty delivering a tuition agreement for Pinkerton Academy. And it's not because we're bad guys, and it's not because they're bad guys. I like to think we're both good guys. But there are needs that Pinkerton Academy have, and there are needs that the Hooksett School District has, and we haven't been able to reconcile those needs.
Give an example.
I'm sorry?
Give an example.
I can't. No. I can't, and you'll see why in a second. The good news is that over the weekend, in fact, Friday night at I think it's 6:30, we received correspondence from Pinkerton Academy that they wanted to renew negotiations with us for a tuition agreement. That was 6/24, I think, Friday evening. I know I'll be criticized. I didn't send that out to the school board right away. I read it. Friday night, I read the contract. I admit that. And sent it out 6:30 a.m. Saturday morning. So, the good news is that although there's an issue with our finalizing that contract, there is a glimmer of hope. There is a glimmer of hope. So, remember I did this, I prepared this presentation last night. Last week. I didn't do it the night before, so there have been a couple of things that changed since I put this together. I just explained one of them. But where we are right now, short of a tuition agreement with Pinkerton, and our problem right now is the clock is ticking. We've got to finalize budgets, and certainly a tuition agreement with anyone has fiscal implications. And if we do put a tuition agreement before the voters, that warrant article has got to be done and submitted in a little more than 4 weeks. So we're behind the 8 ball here, working hard and working overtime to make it work, but short of a tuition agreement with Pinkerton, we may have a situation where Londonderry remains an option, just like in the other scenario I went over. Bow remains an option. Pembroke Academy remains an option under an MOU, and an alternative to a tuition agreement with Pinkerton that we may be able to explore if we can do it quickly would be an MOU with Pinkerton. Under this scenario, Manchester Central and Manchester West are the high schools maintained by the school district and the high schools to which this board can assign students. So I've showed you the I've showed you the concept, what we've been working on. Hopefully I've explained some of the issues with a very complex set of moving parts. I've given you an update as of Friday at 6:30 p.m. And I've given you what things might look like short of being able to finalize that tuition agreement. Now, if I go back to this slide, just to explain a little bit about these satellite schools. The board has really discussed treating these satellite schools like we've treated some of the other schools over the past couple of years that our youngsters have attended. Rather than going through a complex set of procedures and not knowing whether you're going to get into the high school, we'd have an MOU to cover them. But here's what the Hooksett School District would do for you. the Hooksett School District would pay to Londonderry, Bow, or Pembroke Academy the amount of tuition that it would pay to its high school that it maintains, and right now that high school would be Central or West. Parents would be required to pay the difference in tuition, and transportation would be the responsibility of the town. So certainly under a tuition agreement, it's a more solid relationship between the sending and the receiving school district and between us and parents. So if conceptually this all unfolds, then if a youngster goes to Londonderry, Bow, or Pembroke Academy, we would pay the tuition that we would pay to Manchester. Parents would be responsible for the difference, and I'm going to give you some actual numbers in a couple of minutes. Parents would be responsible for the difference, and parents would be responsible for transportation. Very much like how we handle it now. All right, I'm too old for this, I'm tired, I'm not going. Okay, now there are questions that you may have. I was sitting there, but I did, I sat down, I went, if I were a parent sitting in that audience, what would I be asking? I would ask, how will students be placed for the 2014-15 school year? I'm not being a wise guy. That's a decision that has to be made by your school board. It needs to be made very quickly. They're going to have to come up with a policy that for the 2014-15 school year, how students are placed. What will the process or procedure be if the number of students interested in a high school exceeds the number of the high school can accommodate? Same answer. That's an issue that the school board needs to work on as policy and actually come to some closure on very quickly. Oh, let me go back to that. Oh, wow, look. I will tell you this. If I go back to this one, I'm sorry. I had this so well planned and now I'm confusing myself. If I go back to this slide, I can tell you this, that Londonderry, our negotiations with Londonderry, we're doing very well. That the MOU that was negotiated seems to be very acceptable to Londonderry. That MOU has not been approved by your school board. That's another thing on their to-do list. They have to approve that MOU. Or suggest modifications to that MOU in order to get their approval. The Bow High School MOU went very, very smoothly and looks very much like the Londonderry MOU. And again, that MOU will need to be approved, modified or approved by the Hooksett School Board. The Pembroke Academy MOU is not as far along. Pembroke Academy had some changes in legal counsel, and that set them back a little bit. And their legal counsel has informed our legal counsel, that's like, have you got people call my people type thing? Their legal counsel has informed our legal counsel that the board at Pembroke Academy has some changes that they'd like to make to that MOU that we submitted to them, which is right here, which is out on our website, which there are hard copies of over there. I apologize for being a wise guy, because you asked me a good question, and then I forgot it. Because believe it or not, I'm nervous. It's not easy. The negotiations points that are a matter of are not coming to an agreement are in negotiations and are happening between legal counsel. So while it's in negotiations, it remains confidential. So I don't feel that I can elaborate on that. It may be an issue that the board might choose to elaborate on, but representing the board, I don't think I can. Simply because it's still under negotiations, so it's active negotiations. So a lot of the stuff that we're getting is attorney-client privilege. All right, I've done that question, I did this question. Oh, what are the final tuition rates for satellite schools? Well, here's another ambiguous answer. Londonderry, 10.7. Bow, $12,067, but probably less. I contacted the superintendent today. And based upon the budget that he has submitted to the school board in Bow, if that budget were to be adopted, and I'm going, what are they serving over there in Bow? Like, I don't think I've ever submitted a budget and it, like, everybody said yes to it. So assuming that there will be cuts to that budget, the tuition should be somewhat less than $12,067. What? I don't know. It hasn't been established. And I think the way they work, they establish their budget, or the tuition rate is established on or before December 25th, which is an interesting date to establish it, and will be consistent with the tuition rate charged to Dunbarton kids, who just became part of an area agreement, which is a tuition agreement with Bow. Manchester tuition for next year, $10,200. It's not a satellite school. Manchester Central and Manchester West are schools maintained by the Hooksett School District. We have the ability to assign youngsters to those schools. They are very much players in the whole high school assignment process. Pinkerton Academy, the current tuition for 13-14 is $10,292. This year, that tuition rate has not been, for next year, has not been announced. And I think next week, Pinkerton is going to announce that to the member school districts. Pembroke Academy, for the 13-14 school year, the 14-15 rate has not been set, $10,981. So, I mean, if you do some of the mathematics there, and you say, I would like my youngster to go to Pembroke Academy next year, and if the youngster, and if we finalize an MOU with Pembroke, and the youngster is accepted into Pembroke, and the tuition is $10,981, we will send a check to Pembroke for $10,200, and parents will pay the difference. That's how the satellite schools work. I have more good news. I'm almost done. There are issues yet to be addressed. I gave you a fairly long list of stuff that's on the board's agenda. I don't mean like the agenda, I mean the list of things to do. A lot of stuff that's got to be done, a lot of decisions, a lot of policy decisions have got to be made. And as I said, the drafts are out on our website, so feel free. We've got to make some decisions about what happens beyond 2014, 2015. We can send our youngsters to Manchester through 2018. So we need, as a community, to make some decisions about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it beyond 2018 in our relationship with Manchester. If we don't successfully negotiate a tuition agreement with Pinkerton, we are going to have to and do an MOU for 14-15. We're going to have to keep at it and keep negotiating to see if we can come up with an agreement for 15-16. And I guarantee you this, that as soon as all those questions are answered, as soon as those questions are answered, those last policy decisions are made, and I know what I have to do, this man will do it. I don't care how many parent nights we have to have. We will meet with our 8th grade parents so that when all this is in place, there is no anxiety that their kids are going to be served the way they should be served, and the parent choices will make a difference. That we will do. We're ready to roll. I've indicated to the receiving district superintendents of the satellite schools that I'm ready to sit down with them and talk about this first process. Now, you're going to notice I'm kind of a jerk, but I'm not an idiot. You're going to notice that some of these MOUs, like it may say, by November 1st, we're going to do this. And, you know, somebody said to me, November 1st is already come and gone. And I went, no! What happened to October? We know that, and the receiving district superintendents know that. And we will work it out. If it says we're going to do something by November 1st, and they don't approve the MOU until November 15th, this isn't all about gotcha. You know what it's about? You know what it's really all about? We're in trouble. We are in trouble in terms of providing a 21st century education for our kids. And you know what? And I'm done. You know what we need to do? As a community, we've got to join hands, work together, and do what's best for kids. Thank you. I have 2 more slides. I have 2 more slides. I mean that with all the passion in every bone in my body, I mean that. If it takes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, your kids will get what they deserve. So anyway, here's where we are. Now I'm sweating. I thought you said it was cold in here. Here's where we are, people. I'm on this merry-go-round. You know, we have a conceptual plan. We have a backup plan for 14-15 so that we can back into this. There are decisions that have got to be made. Tough decisions, heart-wrenching decisions, decisions not everyone will agree on. But before I end, let me ask you this. When you walked in here, you had an idea of where you wanted your kid to go to high school. If you look at that conceptual plan, is there anybody whose needs are not served? I rest my case. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to the board chair.
At this point in time, we're going to take questions from the audience. You can come up to the mic, state your name and address, and ask the question either to Dr. Littlefield or to the Hooksett School Board. I also want to make the Hooksett community aware that Mary Anderson, who is the headmaster at Pinkerton Academy, she has been the headmaster since 2003, and she has been with the Pinkerton Academy for 39 years, during which she was also the financial administrator and a business teacher, is in attendance this evening, as is Harry Burnham, the chairman of the Pinkerton Board of Trustees. Harry has served on the board as the chair for 11 years, and he has been on the board for 27 years. Chip Underhill, who many of you who have toured Pinkerton may have met, is the executive director of public relations and externals affairs. He manages the school communications, including parent newsletter, website, and other media. Chip would like to say hello to all of you this evening who have met him on your recent tour. They are both in attendance this evening, and I just wanted to make sure everyone in the community realized that. So if you would like to approach.
Good evening, I'm Fred Hunt-Bull. I'm really interested in hearing more about transportation. We've been told that we're on our own if we go to Pembroke, Bow, or Londonderry. But I'd like to know about buses to the other two schools, including potentially buses from after-school activities at Pinkerton. Because without buses, I don't have any choices.
Okay. Do you want us to address your question now to the best of our ability? Okay. As of how the board has voted to this point, we'll continue to provide transportation to Manchester. Those schools which are considered satellite schools, we will not provide busing. There is a bus that picks up and drops off in the back parking lot that was arranged via Londonderry High School. At our last school board meeting, we removed the Pinkerton buses because it appeared that our negotiations with Pinkerton would not continue for the start of the 2014-15 school year. If that were to change and they were to become the anchor school, we would revisit that.
Hello, I'd like to thank first, my name is Darlene Mann, 89 Corvo Drive, Hackett Hill. I'd like to thank the principals for doing a great job with my kids. And although it took many special education meetings, my daughter was hit by a tractor-trailer truck. It took 4 meetings for me to get her on a 504 plan, which addressed her musculoskeletal problems. It took 5 meetings for me to get my son an IEP. It turns out he has a traumatic brain injury, autism, anxiety, and depression. Marge Pollock, I'd like to thank her personally for her help with the special education. And I will relentlessly and tirelessly advocate for special education. I would like, my first question, I have a few questions. I'll try to be really fast. I've noticed $75,000 was moved from the special education budget about within the last 2 to 3 months.
If we could please, this isn't a regular school board meeting, this is about our high school issue,
yes.
So if you could please keep it to questions about high school.
Was that money used?
If I could just finish, we do have a special meeting tomorrow evening, and we also have a meeting on December 3rd, so if you have specific questions about the Hooksett School District.
This is very pertinent. Well, maybe you can think about this question for the next 24 hours, and maybe you can answer me tomorrow night. Was part of that $75,000 used to buy out the Manchester tuition agreement? I have tirelessly pored over the budget documents, and I cannot find any evidence of where exactly is that $75,000. Meanwhile, my son is being denied an iPad, which the Department of Education, Diana Petschauer, who is a very prominent assistive technology expert has recommended my son receive the iPad, and he has not received it. Yet $75,000 is missing from the special ed budget. Under the federal law called IDEA, special education money is to stay for special education services, nothing else, including math and focus textbooks. I also am a little bit suspicious of why no examples can be given specifically as to why negotiations are failing with Pinkerton. Attorney-client privilege is much understood by myself as I have legal experience. Hooksett is the client here. Dr. Littlefield is not the client. We, all the Hooksett people who pay taxes, I myself paying $7,700 a year, are the clients. Can the board give us any examples of why the negotiations are failing with Pinkerton?
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we make public the details of the Pinkerton negotiation. If I get a second, I'll speak to my motion.
I'll second that for discussion.
I think the majority of it is public. I think people have the right to know where we're at, and I don't think it's going to hamper negotiations at all. And I agree with what she said. The Hooksett is the client here.
Is there any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 No.
All those opposed?
Opposed.
Sorry.
Opposed. Motion fails. Please continue.
My next question is, why aren't there any representatives from Manchester Central, Manchester West, Pembroke Academy, or Bow, or Londonderry? Even though we have 70 students currently in Londonderry High School, we have students in Pinkerton currently, and Bow. Why is only Pinkerton representatives here?
Pinkerton was the only school that extended that they would like to be in attendance this evening.
Were the other schools invited formally?
There were no schools that were invited formally. This meeting is for the Hooksett School Board and the superintendent to present our conceptual plan and what is currently going on. It was not it was their decision to come, and we welcome them, but we did not extend an invitation to any of the school districts we are negotiating with. This was for the public.
According to the data received at the roundtable discussion, which very kindly was put on by Mr. Pearl, and I thank you very much for that innovative idea. I've poured over the data that the volunteers at the library typed up, and many, many, many parents still want their children to go to Manchester West and Manchester Central, as well as Londonderry and Bow. So I do find it a little bit odd that they weren't invited, given that the citizens of Hooksett have indicated that they want their children to go to other schools. I personally know employees in special ed in Pinkerton who work with my son directly in the private sector, and as such, I propose that every special education team in Hooksett get to tour Pinkerton, and I've asked this question 2 weeks ago at the special education meeting. Can you as a team tour Pinkerton? Can we tour Londonderry? Can we tour West? The high school education coordinator, Rebecca Martel, stated no. You live on that side of the river on Hackett Hill, your kid is going to West. She had never met my son before, never read his diagnostic file, never read his IEP, never read his school psych report or his neuropsychological testing, but yet she unilaterally said, where you live is where your kid has to
I just
go.
want to remind you that this isn't specifically about your interaction with the Hooksett School District. This is an overall discussion. If you have individual issues, I would ask you to please contact your special ed coordinator or members of the administration. This is not an opportunity to air our laundry.
Madam Chair?
An opportunity, excuse me, the chair is speaking. Thank you. This is an opportunity for people to ask questions regarding this presentation.
I didn't get to finish my question about that specifically is, I would like to formally propose, and I would like a board vote, for each special education team, will the school board be willing to support that each special education team be willing to consider every single school that a special education student is eligible to go to under the satellite agreement? Now, as you said, every student that has special education services has extra money that they will need to be set with. Will the board support teams actually going and touring the school in order to gather data, rather than unilaterally saying, you live on the side of the river, you go there? I would like a formal decision about this, because every single team for every single parent is different. So I think without a formal policy, each team just making their own decisions is very unfair to our special education students.
You have a point of
Okay,
order on
thank
the
you very
floor.
much. Could the next person who has a question, we're not going to address that issue specifically this
Madam
evening.
Chair?
If I have the floor, thank you. We will look into that in the future. Thank you.
Madam
May I have
Chair?
a date and time of when that question
No,
will
I'm
be
not,
addressed?
I'm not able to commit to that this evening, a date and time of when. We
Because
will
I
look
have
at
an
it in the
IEP
future.
coming, an IEP meeting next week, so I will need an answer as soon as possible.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Liscars.
I just want to address Mrs. Mann's question about tonight's format. As a board member, first of all, I'm very happy to see everybody here tonight. It's good to see a packed house, and it's really nice to see the display, the flat panel TVs, the iPads. It's really great. Me personally, as a board member representing you, I had no notice of that at all. So I'm surprised tonight, to be honest with you.
Can you, no,
And as a school board member representing Hooksett residents, I shouldn't be surprised. We should be made aware of everything that's getting arranged. So to your point about representation of the other schools, it's a very good point. Because there are people, as you saw, raise their hands who are interested in different schools. Because parents have different reasons for choosing schools for their children. Something I dropped off out there from another meeting has the statistics. This was delivered by Dr. Littlefield. The one I had is October 18th, but he delivered one November 1st. And it's just an accurate list of all the kids and where they go to school. So that's available from the Hooksett School Board. I suggest everybody take a look at that. And some graphs I made very kind of quickly give you a glance at where Hooksett children go to school. 50% of last year's graduating 8th graders went to Manchester schools. They chose it. Arguably the toughest year we've ever faced in Manchester. So those stats you can't ignore. 70% of all the children that attend high school in Hooksett still go to Manchester schools. So although I do support and I voted to approve negotiations continue with Pinkerton, not for this year but for next year, we can't forget that Hooksett is made up of a diverse population, and we're at an inflection point right now in our community where we can send our children to multiple schools because we don't have our own high school. So we really need to think hard and long, not just about us parents in this room who are sending our kids to school, but we have to not forget the Hooksett taxpayer that's footing the bill. There's a lot of elderly in our community. There's a lot of people just getting by. So we have to be fiscally responsible. That's one of the things we swore when we took our oath, that we'd provide great education for these kids, but we do it in a fiscally responsible manner. So I think now we are progressing in that direction, and I want to stay on that direction, but we can't forget about everybody's needs. Thank you.
thank you for your time, and I'd like to thank Mr. Pearl for all of his extra effort that he's done for the community over many, many years, as well as Mr. Liscars arranging the bus to Londonderry High School on his own free time.
No, I'm sorry. May I correct that?
Your forum.
I just want to make sure you understand. Mr. Liscars didn't arrange that bus. That bus was arranged by Londonderry High School, and the transportation that's provided, the same company that I believe it's the same company that provides the bus here. What they tried to do is find a cost-effective way for parents to get a ride to school. The more parents that take a bus, the cheaper it is for the kids to ride. It's the volume of numbers. So if the parents decide they want to go to Pinkerton and arrange a bus, the more kids you get to ride the bus, you'll be able to divide that cost. And, you know, I've heard figures ranging between $800 and $1,000. Some people in the room are taking the bus, they can tell you the exact fee. But it's a cost-effective solution. The Hooksett taxpayer, you know, what we just recently voted down was nearing $190,000 for 4 buses. The budget's tight this year because of the settlement with Manchester, so we had to be fiscally responsible, and I think the board acted well there. So Mr. Lisgard didn't arrange any bus.
Thank you for the effort. I would like to, again,
There's a
emphasize.
line behind you.
There is a line behind you. If you could give other people the opportunity to speak, that would be great.
Something very rudely, sit down. And I hope that was caught on video, whoever shouted that.
Mrs. Cody, Mrs. Preston is waiting. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. My name is Yvonne Preston. I live at 6 Northview Terrace. So I obviously live on the other side of town. We're actually closer to Bow. So my daughter has been attending Bow High School for the last 3 years. She's had a great experience there. We're very happy with it. We did that under the JCD policy at the time, which worked great. It was very smooth, worked excellent. Dr. Cascading over at the superintendent at Bow was wonderful to work with. So we had, you know, coming into this with a really good, you know, history and a good process that we went through. So I understand things are changing and things need to change. And I want to just acknowledge and appreciate the work that you've put into it. I really do appreciate that. And I hope it goes a little smoother so that everyone could have, you know, a moment of take a breath and know where their kids are going. I guess my question to you is this, to all of you, and first of all, there was somebody who asked me to ask this question, if everybody could just announce themselves, because there's some people who don't know who all of you are. So you can do that at some point. But the question I have for all of you is maybe when you're disseminating information to the public, you know, this was a great night, but I, as a citizen of Hooksett, am hearing everybody talk and everybody, you know, Dr. Littlefield said that we all have to come together as a community. These are our kids, and we do need to come together as a community, but you can't expect everybody to do that if you don't come together as a board and really support. I'm so tired of seeing this play out in the public. I'm sick of it. My kids are sick of it. I'm sick of it. I pay a lot of taxes here. I'm not sick of it anymore. Let's all together now. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Dan, if you wouldn't mind just for a second, because everyone on this side of the table does not have a name tag and everyone may not know who they are, and that was pointed out. If you could just introduce yourselves, that would be appreciated, just to help.
Good evening. I'm Marge Pollock, the Assistant Superintendent.
Karen Lasad, the Business Administrator.
Becky Wing, Director of Math, Accountability, and Assessment.
Matthew Benson, Principal, Colley Middle School.
Steve Harris is Principal at Hooksett Memorial.
Drew Barstow, Principal, Underhill School.
I'm Tricia Corcus. I'm the Chair of the Hooksett School Board.
My name is David Pearl, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Hooksett School Board.
Cheryl Axton.
I'm David Pearl, Vice Chair of the school board. No, really, I'm the clerk, John Lisgars.
Phil Denbo.
Sorry that we didn't do that at the beginning.
Hi, I'm Pam Walker. I live on Casey Drive, Mark. I'm so glad you're still there because you're the only person I know. I think I officially qualify as one of the elderly in the community now. So I have a couple of specific questions for related to cost, and I don't know if they need to be addressed to you or not. I'm a little confused. The difference where Pinkerton is now designated to be a satellite school, but yet they will still, if I'm understanding correctly, have an MOU and not a contract?
No. No.
Okay.
One of two things may happen. The Academy has expressed an interest in beginning to talk again about the tuition agreement.
Understood, yeah.
Short of a tuition agreement, we would like to negotiate an MOU with them so that Pinkerton becomes one of our choices.
Okay. But ultimately, your goal is for it to be a tuition agreement similar to what you have with Manchester?
Yes.
Okay. So if that's the case and you're successful, will the rates of tuition continue to be compared to Manchester as the base? Or will they then be switched to be compared to Pinkerton Academy as the base?
That's a tough question.
I'm
and
good at those.
And is a policy question, not a superintendent question. So that would be a decision.
Well, I differ. I beg to disagree. Wouldn't it be stated in the contract of Pinkerton?
No. What do you explain to me?
Let's say if Pinkerton establishes an agreement with us and their base tuition is $11,000.
Right.
And you're saying Manchester is 10 too.
Yep.
Okay. And I want to send my child to Bow. Am I going to pay the difference between the Pinkerton tuition or the Manchester tuition?
That is a policy decision that the board would have to make. Because until 2018, because of the agreement that came out of Hillsborough Superior Court, the Manchester School District is considered to be, West and Central are considered to be high schools maintained by the Hooksett School District. So that if we were successful in negotiating a tuition agreement with Pinkerton, the district would actually be maintaining or have the ability to assign youngsters to 3 high schools: West, Central, and Pinkerton.
Okay, then I'll ask the board then. What would your position be if you sign an agreement with Pinkerton and their tuition rate, their base rate, is higher than Manchester? Will parents who send their children to Pinkerton be charged the difference over and above what would be to Manchester?
That would be a board decision based on the will of the entire board. They would go with a majority vote. Do you want to individually?
Discussed it to this point?
Yes, we have. Previously, we had set our base tuition rate as that of what would be Pinkerton Academies, and last Tuesday, we reverted our base tuition rate to 10.2 for next year. So at which time it was determined if there was a contract with Pinkerton and they were our school of record, or if Manchester was, the board would need to make a decision at that point in time what would be the base tuition.
So for now, it's 10.2, but it could change next year.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Pearl.
Yeah, last week it was the Pinkerton rate, which was unknown. Then we voted to change it back to the Manchester rate. In our deliberations, we learned that that base rate can be any number that we pick. It doesn't necessarily have to be connected to any tuition rate that we're paying anybody. So theoretically, we could vote to make that $10,000 if we wanted to. There is no obligation to link it to anyone.
There certainly is tradition.
Yes, but we asked the question, and it was linked to the Pinkerton rate, and then last Tuesday, the vote of the board was to move it back to the Manchester rate.
Okay. May I ask what the Pinkerton rate was a week ago?
Pinkerton rate, this is 10,292 right now. We've heard 10,7 for next year, 10,7 something, but there's no official rate for Pinkerton yet that I know of.
Tricia? So this kind of actually winds into a question somebody asked, actually I believe the first woman asked. So as David alluded to, before we ran into like a big snag last week, we had actually had the tuition number set at what the Pinkerton number would be for next year, which we weren't aware of yet. We also had busing to Pinkerton in the budget. When that hit the snag, again, like Phil's talking about, we did the plan B, which means we rolled back the buses, obviously, to save the money. and then also had to roll the tuition number back just because that's the only number we have currently. But that doesn't mean, again, as a board, as obviously things are pretty fluid right now, so we don't know what the future will hold, but if things change, obviously some of the parameters could change as well.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. If you go with the tuition agreement with Pinkerton, that would have to go before the voters of the town, correct?
Yes.
But if you go with an MOU, it would not?
Madam Chair?
That is correct.
Madam Chair? Just something to keep in mind as we go through this process. We just, as a community, paid a significant amount of money to get out of a contract with Manchester.
Well aware.
And one of the biggest reasons, the biggest contention items between Manchester and Hooksett was the contention that Manchester believed that the agreement said all of Hooksett's children should go there. And we contended that the language in the contract allowed us to individually allow to assign children to alternative schools. So we've just paid a significant amount of money to get out of that type of contract. So I just want to go on record with all you folks here that I will not support any kind of a contract where we have to get locked into any type of a number again. We just got through that with Manchester, so we have that history to look at. So I would support any type of contract or memorandum of understanding that didn't commit us to any kind of numbers. I think that's the best step for Hooksett right now, is to provide the education choice for the parents,
Right.
but not lock us in financially to something that's untested for this community.
Sure. As a taxpayer, from a financial standpoint, knowing that we're going to pay, what, is it an extra $1.2 million to Manchester? You know, I'd kind of like to know what the base is for the kids going forward. Along that line, not having a copy of the Manchester agreement, the MOUs have some, all three of them have language about specific extraordinary special education services that would have to be assumed by the Hooksett district if they couldn't be provided in the satellite schools. Safe to assume the same language is in the Manchester contract currently? Or not?
Doesn't have to be, because Manchester is a high school maintained by Hooksett. It is our high school, so we would have to provide the service and pay for the service.
Madam Chair?
Okay, so it's no difference. Okay.
Just
That's all
quickly,
I'm asking.
there are possibly some extra copies on the table up there of the recent Manchester agreement that is available on the website as well. But just in case you want to pick one up with that.
I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jen Lugier, 65 Lindsay. So I have a few questions. One of them was when discussing the MOU with Londonderry, you had mentioned a number of 10-7. But when I read the MOU of Londonderry, it says 10 to 90. So what does the MOU for Londonderry mean for a Hooksett student that will be attending as of next year? Secondly, yes, we do have quite a long to-do list. What are we looking at for time? Last year at this time, I had multiple acceptance. Pinkerton's deadline was December 1st. By Christmas, our trees were all pretty and I knew where my kids were going. When are you gonna do it? How are these kids gonna know? By January? Is it February? Is it March? All these MOUs that we're hoping to enter into absolutely have specific dates. I have a 7th grader. I see November 1st. If you vote on that, can I put my name in? Because their deadline's by November 1st. I mean, these MOUs are great in the sense that, yes, they're offering choice, but I think the choice is being taken away from the parent. I think that with the JCB, the parent has some ownership. You have to go to the school. You make the application. The school then decides if you can go or not. What I'm understanding of the MOUs is that if a number were to exceed, I'll stick with Londonderry, exceed the 40 students, then this board is going to set a criteria that states whether my child can go or not, whether I was on time setting the application process or not. I don't think that's fair to all the kids. I don't think dragging our feet, and it seems like running in circles is a good idea. My children do not attend Pinkerton. My family's plan is for not the kids, for my children to attend Pinkerton, but yet this Pinkerton tuition contract, honestly, is the only thing that gives everybody a choice. I don't want to tell you that your child can't go to Pembroke or Bow, and I don't want you to tell me that mine can't go to Londonderry because I don't have a sibling there. So there's some really, really difficult decisions that need to be made. Enough is enough. Let's get it done. Give Dr. Littlefield the direction so he can run with it. Thank you.
I would just like to answer to that. And my daughter went through JCB and attends Pembroke High School. Twice, Mr. Liskars and I motioned for this board to push this all back and assign everybody under JCB this year, so that our kids that are in 8th grade would not be part of what is going on right now. That failed. This board then suspended decisions on JCB. Again, we voted against that. There were instructions given down to the 8th grade teachers not to write recommendation letters. The high schools are waiting to see what we're going to do, all because we've involved this 8th grade class in this decision. And I agree with Mrs. Legier. JCB puts you with the school you want to go to, and you work it out. Because we have not set criteria yet, and I don't know how we're going to. So I just wanted people to know that I was in favor of JCB running its course this year as we considered all of these things and decided if we wanted to do them in the coming year. Thank you.
Tricia?
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, sir.
I just, Mrs. Legier, that's a couple of questions, one of which is unanswered. I'm listening. I'm not trying to avoid anything. You're right. In Article 6 in the Londonderry tuition agreement is confusing. The $10,290 that's there is what Pinkerton's current tuition is. So when that got written, the intent of that Article 6 is that if your youngsters at Londonderry High School, as a satellite school, you pay the difference between base tuition and Londonderry tuition. Londonderry tuition is $10,700. That $10,292 is confusing in the Londonderry contract. It's confusing. I talked to the Londonderry superintendent about it today. Said, this is like confusing. And so before the Hooksett board actually would approve the Londonderry agreement, I would recommend through our attorney that we clarify that language, because it's essentially the same language in that paragraph as the Bow contract, but leading you to different conclusions. So if Londonderry is $10,700, and if the Hooksett board is willing to pay $10,200 for base tuition to Manchester, then the parent's responsibility to Londonderry would be $500. Except for Mrs. Legier and 55 other parents. Because later on, the parents, and this is an issue I made during negotiations with Londonderry. You know, what about the people who you took last year, who you said you'd take them for what we were paying to Manchester? And now it's going to be something different. So the MOU does grandfather the youngsters who are already at Londonderry High School, and there'll be no fiscal commitment to parents, because that was the deal when they accepted it. The other thing that I do have to correct is if there are any parents who need letters of recommendation made for high school entrance, you should request those letters of recommendation. There is some confusion about where you need them and where you don't. And we asked teachers to put a hold on it until we could, and that's like my job. That's an administrative decision, really not a policy decision. It's what I do for a living. And through the principal, teachers were concerned about the number of requests they were given. We've done some research, and parents justifiably, understandably confused, were asking for documentation they did not need. So certainly if you're applying for a high school, if you're applying to a high school, and part of the application process requires a letter of recommendation from a teacher, that letter of recommendation will be written. And I'll say it one more time. We researched it over the past week and found out that there was some misunderstanding about having to do that. So if it needs to be done, we'll do it. Otherwise, we don't. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I let Phil go. I just want to speak 1 second. So a couple points referring to what Jen just spoke about. So first of all, Phil made a big point of saying that we don't want these satellite districts cherry picking our kids. So part of the MOU process, and if you look at the agreements, is the fact that we want those selections to be blind, I guess I want to say. So in other words, they can't cherry pick kids, certain kids, to not take others. That's point number one. That's the good thing about having the MOU. Number two, last year, the way the JCB process in prior years, what ended up happening was, again, we talked about tonight with the number, folks having to pay the difference between what we would call, I guess, a base tuition and the tuition at those schools. So there was a big delta actually on some of these schools in prior years, like especially with Bow, like Phil was talking about, ideally that's the most expensive one, but in other years, when the base tuition was less, someone would have to come out of pocket with a significant amount of money, which I know Cheryl had this concern before, where folks like with a bunch of kids wouldn't be able to do the same have the same choices that other folks would, which obviously that's not fair. So I only have a couple kids now, but I grew up, I was 1 of 9. And there's no way my parents could have sent me to a school that they wanted to send me to and paid out of pocket. So there's another concern there. So obviously you've seen that if we get a rate, it's going to be fairly close where it's not going to kill anybody, even if you have to throw a few bucks out of your pocket. The other part about approving kids, so in the last couple of years with the JCB, it's fallen on the board to approve each individual kid. A better way to do that would be to put a process in place and let Phil administer it, because you know what, I know there's probably folks in the audience, again, either way, where you would or would not want somebody sitting down on this board and approving your kid up or down. That should be a process, again, that we put in place and it's handled by Phil. So again, it's a blind process and he just applies it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, just a couple of issues there. Phil had mentioned you're going through the differences between JCB and the MOU process, talking about tuition and the difference. It's the same. We're going to pay the base rate to Manchester, which is 10.2. That would be whether you use the MOU process or you use JCB. So there's no difference in the money we're going to pay. And regards to the process, definitely with JCB, some of the schools were more selective with their process last year. They had a more stringent process, and some didn't. With the MOU process, that's going to be, the list is going to be whittled down by Hooksett, but it'll be done by the superintendent, and he will use the criteria this board sets to make his decision. So it's not really a blind process. It's going to be done by our superintendent, but he's going to use whatever process we come up with on this board. That's a difficult process because it's going to be a process that determines if, you know, let's just say you can go 10 kids to the school and there's 11 kids. How do you pick that 11th child to not go? It's a very tough job. So if any of you have suggestions that you'd like to see in that process, contact the school board or contact the superintendent. Let your voice be heard, okay? Because it's very important. Thank you.
In the meantime, the clock is still ticking. Jeff Perrault, 65 Farmer Road. First, I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. And I'd just like to start by saying both my kids, I think, have gotten a really high-quality education here in town. But I have many concerns right now. Assuming that all of these schools accept your MOU, what process do you have in place? You've touched on it a couple of points, but you say they won't cherry pick. You don't even have an idea of what the process is going to be as to what kid goes where right now, and whose decision is that going to be? Now, I don't mean any disrespect to anyone on the board, but you don't know what's best for my child, what's best for their child, what's best for their child. I think we should have some input. As far as to the figure that you came up with, what's going to be paid, the Manchester tuition, again, that never went to anyone in the town. That's a school board's decision. And again, I don't mean any disrespect, but it's not in your best interest. So I guess the question I have is, do you have any idea what process is going to be in place as far as what child is going to what school? In the past, it was if you lived on this side of the river, you're going to this school. If you live on this side of the river, you're going to this school. And I didn't think that was right back then. I don't think it's right now. It wasn't right then. I hope that's not going to be the future.
Well, I can say when it was the West or Central, one side or the other, Manchester was always very accommodating. We lived on the east side and my daughter went to west, so that had worked. One of the things that is concerning in two of the MOUs, Pinkerton and Londonderry, if you read it close, it says that Hooksett will send a list of all interested students to the school. To me, that is not in line with us paring down the list. For instance, if Londonderry is going to take 40 and we have 50 interested students, according to the MOU, as I read it, we would send them a list of 50 interested students. So I think the MOU has to change, or this board has got to not adopt a criteria.
I'm sorry, did you say 50?
My example was if, for instance, they were going to take 40 and 50 parents showed interest. Reading the MOU, it says that we will send a list of all interested students to the school. So it doesn't say, except for Bo, it doesn't say that we will pare that list down to the amount that the school is going to accept. So if we are going to create a criteria, we need to modify these MOUs or they're not going to be in sync with the process that this board's talking about using right now. Under JCB, that process did not come to the board. It was up to the school to accept your child or not. Now, with the MOU, we would become involved. And how we become involved, I just think right now is not clear in the MOU.
Madam Chair. What's your name? I'm sorry.
Jeff Perrault.
Jeff. So, Jeff, you made a really good point when you first started talking because you said it's most important to listen to the parents and get their input. And the way to do that is have multiple public forums, you know, a back and forth between you and the school board. Unfortunately, this board has decided to cancel multiple forums that we had planned.
That's why we're here tonight, because honestly, I feel like I've been kept completely in the dark.
Right. So, I mean, as a citizen of Hooksett, you really should demand that of your board. Just make your voices heard. I mean, tonight's good, but, you know, we have an email list called hsb@sau15.net. Voice your concerns. Let them know you want to hear, you want us to listen to you more. You want more public forums, and the only way you're going to get it is demand it. Okay, we've tried, we've been voted down, so you've got to demand it. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
I was going to say, short of attending every minute of every town meeting and being at every meeting possible, we're still left in the dark. I don't think it's fair. I think some of us should be sitting up there on that board.
Real quick, Jeff? Oh, I guess. So, anyway, the one thing I wanted to say is obviously at the end of the day, regardless of what process is used, we're not going to tell these schools how many kids to take. They're going to tell us how many they can take, and then we have to deal with it. Along those lines, too, I invite all you folks, actually, It seems like along the way you have different factions of folks that show up at meetings. We have regular school board meetings. We've had some in the last 3 or 4 months with all this stuff going on where we've had nobody or one person. So the more of you folks come and either speak during the public portion or not, but just come to the meetings, obviously, and that's the best way to get informed. So, I mean, it's awesome. Actually, everybody showed up here tonight, which is really great. But honest to God, the last I've been on the board since June or July, and most of our meetings, it's crickets. So, anyway, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Pam Walter, 22 Barbary Street. I understand that if I want my child to go to Londonderry, I have to pay the difference in the tuition, which is $500. If my child has an IEP, is it Hooksit's responsibility to pay the special ed fund for my child? Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Or is it the parent's responsibility to
Yeah.
pay for the special education services?
I'll answer these questions, but we're big on procedure. So you probably should address the question to the chair, and she can, if it's a me question rather than my opening my big mouth. Yes, the special education services you are entitled to. What you're not entitled to is the difference in between the Manchester tuition and the base tuition for one of the satellite schools.
Thank you.
Can I finish that, Donna?
Yes, go ahead.
That it will admittedly take a lot of coordination with teams in placing youngsters and coordination between our teams and the special ed teams and the satellite schools. It does get just a little more complicated, but absolutely can be done.
Hi, I'm Donna Moran, 8 Barbary Street. I want to thank everybody, of course, and I want to thank Mrs. Anderson and everybody from Pinkerton who came. I'm a parent who grew up in Manchester, went to the Manchester school system. My daughter goes to Central. She does very well there. And I have a son going into 8th grade. Going into freshman year next year. So we were told from around that Pinkerton was going to be kind of a done deal as far as like the negotiation part, and that we were going to vote on it. That was sort of the word around town. So then all of a sudden the school board votes that there's no buses because negotiations are breaking down. And then suddenly, woo, negotiations end. And I'm just wondering why that is there. I know you can't release your negotiation, reasons or anything like that because they're, whatever, legal reasons or whatever.
No, they voted it down.
Right, you voted it down. But, I know one of the reasons is because the MOUs are demanding that no kids who have drugs or suspensions or this, that we don't send them there, but we say we're sending them to Pinkerton. So if we want Pinkerton, and it's our conceptual plan, and it allows for everybody to go everywhere they want with the best money, why are we not working harder to negotiate? It just seems like Hooksett is asking for so much. Are we asking more from... I know Mrs. Anderson wants to chime in, or so it's you, or what's going on?
By a vote of the board, we stated that at this point we are still in negotiations with them, and negotiations involve client lawyer privilege, and we're just not comfortable as a board.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm just wondering, is there actually a negotiation going on, or is it saying, this is what we want, and you need to do this?
Negotiations are going back and forth.
And then my other question is just as far as the MOU thing. I'm not, well, forget it, I don't want to ask about that. I'll ask about something else because I don't want to, we have this line back here. I'm not really clear on, I know you said negotiations are still open. Is it open just for the MOU at Pinkerton, or is it open like it could be an anchor school for next year, not 2015, for our incoming freshmen?
Currently, at this time, all negotiations are open with Pinkerton.
All negotiations. All right, that's good news. Thank you.
Well, to be perfectly clear, the board voted last week to continue negotiations for 215, 216, after we were informed that we had hit a roadblock. I can speak for myself. I don't support a contract that has restrictions in it. After what happened with Manchester, when we signed our contract in 2003 with Manchester, it was overwhelmingly what we wanted to do. 10 years later, we find ourselves in court and end up paying a settlement to remove ourselves from a contract that we willingly went into. That's why I think we needed this year to consider this and to consider what the public wants before we commit the community to 10 years in which we'll be contractually obligated. And that's why I wanted to make this decision for next year, so we had a full year to have forums, input, discuss, and not rush into this at the very last moment. Thank you. You already had it here.
Hi, my name is Sherry Durazano, 9 Heron View Drive. I have a 8th grader, and we've been touring and worried about high schools since last year. We've done our research. We've toured Bow, we've toured Londonderry, we've toured Pinkerton. I asked to tour Central, and they said, no, you're not allowed. So I snuck in with the incoming freshmen in April to actually see the facility because they told me no. So I said, well, at least I got to see it. With that all being said, and I appreciate how you guys do what Mr. Liskar has said and Mr. Pearl said about, you know, the public should demand what they want. After seeing all the schools, after doing our research, I feel that that option up there with Pinkerton Academy as the anchor school allows everybody in this room to be satisfied. And if we demand it, we demand that Pinkerton be our anchor school. I just want to hear everybody clap. Who wants to be as an anchor school? As you can see, I've asked every single person in here to come up here and demand it, but obviously we'll be here till 2 in the morning, and I don't want to do that. So here's your panel, here's your crowd. Let's make Pinkerton our anchor school. I don't want to go with 25 reasons why, because they're all out there. Thank you.
Madam Chair? Madam Chair? Thank you, Mrs. Durazano. As we have it, you know, many of our school boards, it's a different night every school board night. Depends who's there in the crowd. Some nights we have all Manchester supporters and telling us we got to go to Manchester, and then we have all Pinkerton supporters another night, and so it's difficult. We have to remember, though, we have a town, you know, over 12,000 people strong. Okay, and you're here tonight, most of you, because you have a child that this decision or these decisions that are going on right now by this board affect your child directly. Now, there's a lot of elderly, there's a lot of taxpayers in the town, and
we can vote on it, bring it to the town, and vote on it.
Yeah,
if the town votes no, then that's okay. Then you guys did your job.
Sure, and we are, there will be a warrant article that comes up, but the problem is the warrant article isn't until March. So we're making decisions now to get these kids into school now. You have to remember, and you know, this isn't really, I believe, what we would want to promote, but at the same time, we have JCB policy available today. The board suspended it till November 19th, excuse me. The JCB policy that we have in place today was suspended by this board until November 19th. Well, we have that policy, I'm just saying. And so that policy is available to parents.
It's no good. If the policy is absolutely no good, if the other schools are not willing to do anything because of your board waiting, they're waiting on you. You guys have to make decisions.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm just saying that policy is available today. And this board has made the decisions to wait till the end of the year like we're doing right now. Turn motions down all year long to get this process moving. So this is where we are. I'm just saying that policy is available to you. If the other schools will not honor it, then you should bring that up to the superintendent and or the school board and complain about it. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Levesque.
Dave Levesque, 29 Laurel Road. I have a few comments and suggestions. Mr. Dembo, you mentioned the participation at our school board meetings. I do make every attempt to attend them, as you know. Mr. Liscars, 12,000 voters, like on election day, can get out of there, whatever, and make it here. And if they need a ride, I'll pick them up. Okay? I sometimes watch them at home because I sit there and swear and yell at my computer at the dysfunction that I see in this group that we are supposed to look up to, be our representatives. As bad as it is, if we didn't get enough aggravation before leaving the meeting, we go home and read about it on every blog. We see people calling people names. Members of this board are doing it, and you want us to put faith in that? I sit at home and yell at my computer because I can't do it in the meeting without being out of order. I don't have any kids left going to high school, okay? So I'm not here because I have one. I'm here because I had twin daughters graduate one, and they sat in the lunchroom for 3 periods a day because West could not provide them enough classes. You want to talk about an expensive settlement, Mr. Liscars? Did it get us what we wanted with Manchester? No. Did it get us new textbooks? Nope. Did it get us a tech program? It did for 1 year. That is now gone. Did it get us any updates to the SAU? We talk about this contract that we're supposed to abide by. Did they ever uphold their end of the bargain? I don't think so. So what is expensive settlement? I don't care if it was another $1 million. But my daughters, they wasted their senior year. They can never get it back. This settlement becomes more expensive when we continue to send kids there. They don't even have Common Core standards. They don't give us a seat on the board. We can't even enter a meeting and talk. Our settlement cost us a seat at the table, 2 seats at the table with Pinkerton. We have somewhat of a voice. Yes, could we be outvoted because we only have 2 seats? We are at least at the table. So that settlement that you keep coming back, we have to pay for, we have to pay for it. It got us a ticket out. If we spend another dime to Manchester, that's an expensive settlement. You have the plan, the conceptual plan there. They're on the list. If people want to stay there, good for them. I don't want to tell you where you have to send your kid. That provides that opportunity. I'm not sold on the STEAM program, which is now being offered as a catch-22. It's nothing until I see it. My last question for the board, a couple of years ago when they did a high school study, I don't know if it ever got to the point where, what was the actual dollar amount that Hooksett would have to pay per student? Because we keep looking at numbers. We keep seeing 10 to 12,000. Again, 10 years ago I sat in the other room, talked about a possible high school. 5 years ago, possible high school. Are these numbers close to what it would cost us if we had our own high school? We would not have to rely on anybody but this town to have the control to educate their kids like we do K-8.
the only cost that was determined by that committee was the total cost of construction. We never got to the point of what the cost per child would be once the school was built, but the cost to build a Hooksett-only high school was $55 million. I sat on that committee when my children were in first grade.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Pearl was first.
Okay.
I just want to make it clear that, we motioned tonight very early to release the details of the Pinkerton contract. I feel there's no reason we can't. I think that's why you're here. I think that's what we should be talking about. And I think it's unfortunate as the questions keep piling up that the board is not willing to talk about what it is that the snag was so that you folks can decide whether or not you feel that snag is a snag or maybe the town feels it's not a snag. I'd like to know that, but I can't because the board will not release that information.
My name's Ray McCled. I live at 9 Ellen Street. So before I ask a question, I'm just going to point out, somebody said earlier about passing information. I know that I've been receiving emails from the school district. I guess what I don't understand is why we haven't used the email, because it goes out to every one of these parents here who have kids in the system. So sending out emails to tell about this meeting and about some of the other information that you want folks to know about might be a great idea to use. So just a suggestion in terms of getting information out. It's polling. I know you did an informal poll, Superintendent, where you asked people what they wanted. It might be great to send out a poll through the email system that we have for everybody who's registered to maybe get a more accurate picture, because yeah, there's a lot of folks here who want to go to Pinkerton, and that's understandable, and Bow and Londonderry, and people who want to stay in Manchester. I think it's unfair to say, just because there's a lot of people here tonight that want to go to one or the other, that means that that's where everybody should go. So I just think we need to keep that in mind. We all need to keep in mind that everybody here wants what's best for their kids, and you can't fault them for that. You can't make them enemies for that. You can't hate people for that. It's going to be a tough decision, no matter what you come up with. Whether you build a high school someday, whether you go with this, whether you stay in Manchester, it's going to be a tough decision, and you will not make everyone happy. But we can't turn on each other over this. We're trying to say we want what's best for our kids and be role models as good parents, and we're behaving badly. The board's behaving badly. People out in the community are behaving badly. I just think it should stop. It really should. You guys don't have an easy job, but you need to come together and find a solution. So if you want to put a poll out there, that might get a more accurate idea. So the question I have is wrapped around the numbers. I know that the information you have over there shows roughly non-private school kids of somewhere in the vicinity of 438 public school, high school for this year. And I know that the contract that they're trying to negotiate is going to have, or at least initially, my understanding is going to have some limitations on the number of kids that were not going to Pinkerton as an anchor school, correct? Right now, the MOUs show that, for example, Londonderry, 40 kids per year, per grade level. Bow, according to this, is 10, and there's no number yet for Pembroke Academy. That right there is going to be somewhere over 200 kids on the MOU that could potentially be going to these other schools. So the question I have is, if you're negotiating a contract with Pinkerton and it stipulates that after so many years, only so many kids can not go to Pinkerton, if there's a limit on that, is that going to equal the numbers that are in that MOU?
Are you addressing that question?
Does that make sense? Or I hope I was. The MOUs state right now, if you add them up, that somewhere over the range of 200 kids can attend those satellite schools, not including Manchester, but that's Londonderry, Bow, and Pembroke. So if there's a limit on the Pinkerton contract that says, Hooksett, you can send, all of your kids have to come here except X number, doesn't X number have to equal the number in those MOUs?
So Ray, I guess you're adding up years from what I understand. So the 40 this year for Londonderry, like you spoke about, will be 40 kids, right? Then you got 10 or 12 at Bow, whatever that number is, right?
But it's per grade level, isn't it?
Going in as freshmen per grade, correct. So like next year, there'll be 40 plus the 10 plus whatever at Pembroke available, and then obviously Manchester is unlimited, and then wherever the other kids are going, so.
But after 4 years, you would theoretically have potentially 160 kids at Londonderry.
Yeah, Phil, yeah, you wanna?
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I guess I'm just trying to understand, is that the sticking point with Pinkerton? And then I guess the follow-on question to that would be, what happens in year 5 of the MOU and in year 4 with Manchester? Are we suddenly going to be saying, okay, our 5 years are up, your 4 years are up, the Pinkerton contract says all but 10%, roughly 60 kids can go elsewhere. Are we going to suddenly be forcing a bunch of people who went to these other schools to now have to go to Pinkerton? I just want to be clear and understand how it works, because I think it's only fair for parents to know what may happen in 4 or 5 years, particularly when they may have siblings.
Well, no, it's not a hard question, but you're talking about, I'm surprised you're aware of some of the information.
Well, it's in the MOU right here.
No, I'm talking about some of the ticketing information.
Stumbled on something there, right?
I don't believe some of that information was public, Dr. Littlefield.
I'm stumbling because, I'm stumbling because some of it I can't talk about because.
We can't hear you, sir.
I'm trying. Is that better? But I do have an answer. Hello? Mute doesn't mean loud, huh? The specifics of the Pinkerton negotiations, I can't address. Whether I would like to or not address them. The answer to your question is no. The obligation under a tuition agreement is to send kids. So make believe that we had a tuition agreement with Raymond, and that tuition agreement said you have to send 50 of your freshmen there every year. And 60 kids wanted to go, well, I don't mean 60 kids. And because of the number of kids that wanted to go somewhere else, we couldn't send the 50. We would limit the number of kids going somewhere else. You'd have to.
Right. And I guess that's the only point I would ask the board to consider when we're looking at this, because most of the folks here tonight are probably, I'm guessing, I'm just making an educated guess, are here because they have kids that are either just went or are going probably next year or the year after. I've heard a couple parents. But in all fairness, I think, you got to look at the long term. You got to look at what happens in 4 years when all those folks that are going to Manchester right now, maybe they got siblings that are going to start in 2 years or 3 years. In 4 years, they're done. Is this contract going to limit them, or are they going to be able to continue on? And are they going to be able to have another sibling? I have 3. I'm not in this situation right now, but my point is, if I had my second one who was a junior in 4 years, and suddenly my incoming freshman, and we say, oh, you can't go. I just think it's important for you to consider that long-term when you're working through this. And that was the only point I wanted to make. I know you know the numbers and they gotta add up, but it's something everybody here should be concerned about too, because I'm guessing a lot of folks aren't, maybe have 2 and 3 kids that are gonna be down the road. And that's probably what a lot of people are focused on right now. You don't wanna have to take one to one school and one to another. So that was the only thing I wanted to ask.
I believe Dr. Littlefield might have.
I defer to the board.
Ray, I'd just like to say that I saw the Pinkerton contract Saturday morning, and that's the first time that I've seen it. This board voted not to have school board representation on the negotiation committee. As I've said before, I would like to be able to talk about that number because that's the relevant point here tonight. This board voted not to talk about that number. Just to answer a couple of your other questions, this board did vote to do a survey. We have not completed the first question of that survey. This board voted twice, which failed, to create an email notification list that anyone could sign up for to receive information from the board. That failed twice. That's all I have.
Yes, Mr. Messina. Go ahead.
Ray, to your point, throughout the negotiations and throughout this concept from day one, what we're trying to do, it's really not, I don't say it's not rocket science, but provide the most flexibility we can. And then on the back end of that, provide the most flexibility we can, and at the end of the day, in reality, all we're doing is, again, like Phil talked about earlier, everybody would be able to attend the schools they want to go to. We were talking about this a few weeks ago. The only thing we're not providing is a Catholic education because we can. So for those people that want to go to Trinity that can, right, they're going to be able to go there. Besides that, with the ranges of choices we're going to have, you can do just about anything you want. All we're literally doing, and I know some of the Manchester folks get their hair up on this, the concept was just to change the anchor from Manchester to Pinkerton. That's all. And folks that love Manchester, Central, West, they'll still be able to go there. We're not saying you can't go anywhere. That's really as simple as it is at the end of the day.
Madam Chair?
Bill, just one question on that point.
Yep.
Is it going to be guaranteed that those people can still go to Manchester after 4 years? Because right now, it only goes to 2018.
Yeah, Ray, that's actually Phil talked about that earlier. So as part of the negotiated settlement, there is the terminology is evading me right now, but we've worked in good faith, I believe, to try to work with Manchester beyond that. So again, that's on our to-do list. Folks aren't going to get frozen out.
Madam Chair? There's a big difference. Right now, again, we paid a lot of money to Manchester. What we have is no limitations at all for Manchester. Initially, that was the point of contention with Manchester and Hooksett is, again, they thought all of the children had to go there. We said no, there was an escape clause in that contract. We just paid so that there is the ability for Hooksett to go anywhere they want, including Manchester. So I think if we were comparing apples and apples, I think it would be, it would be worthwhile. And that's, we're in negotiations now, so we can't talk about what it is we're looking at. But if it were apples and apples, we could have this conversation that it's just one or the other. But it gets down to the details of a contract and what you have as an ability to allow your children to go unlimited. That's what we have with Manchester right now. Thank you.
Mr. Messina.
Mark Messina on Barbary Street. I'd just like to remind you that about a year ago, Manchester was in deep trouble. And you had parents in this room practically jumping up and down saying, get us out of Manchester and find a solution because there was no JC policy that was easy. So before parents could get their kids out of Manchester, and there were no options, people were really, really engaged and really upset about it. I'd like to ask really a numbers question. Metrics, what's changed in Manchester between then and now? Has anything improved? And the long and short of it is not really. But metrics, a number that's important, is what we're paying. And we're now paying Manchester above what we're going to pay Pinkerton. So we've paid more for the same load of nothing. And if you shut off that option somehow, I think you're going to have parents in here, again, jumping up and down and really upset. So please, figure out how to make this happen.
I think Mr. Messina asked a very good question. He asked about the metrics of Manchester. Unfortunately, again, I said the number earlier, 70% of Hooksett children still go to Manchester. We're planning right now here for the future, but this board, one of our jobs is also to make sure that the children who are currently in Manchester schools are getting a quality education. They've been in schools since September. We have ignored what's going on in Manchester basically because we've been hunkered down on these issues here. I recently made a motion, Dr. Littlefield followed through from the board's direction to send a letter to Manchester to get some of those stats that Mr. Messina is talking about, because he's correct. We have to know the data. We can't just assume. We know there's new leadership in Manchester. As a matter of fact, David Ryan is the assistant superintendent there. He's a Hooksett resident, so he cares about the Hooksett kids for sure. And David was, I forget it was like the principal of the year for the state of New Hampshire, and I think he was third runner-up in the nation. So they've got Mr. Ryan. They also have Superintendent Livingston, new superintendent in town. There seem to be some sweeping changes. Are they going to be immediate? I don't think so. But I know they're working on it, and it's our job as a board to collect that data, if nothing else, to make sure that the children that are in the schools right now are not forgotten by this board. Thank you.
Hi, Yvonne Preston, 6 Northview Terrace. I just want to follow up on something that was just said, and that I think is probably one of the biggest crux of the problem here is that I think problems are being brought up and for the record, but is anyone bringing up a problem and giving a solution? Is anybody working together to come up? I mean, that's the kind of stuff I'm hearing all the time. I made a motion, it got turned down. How is everybody bridging a gap here to work together so that we can get this done? And I think that, if anything, you've heard from everybody tonight that they want that so badly. So I'm just asking you to, not just get something on the record, but work together and come up with that solution. Don't just present a problem, don't just throw out a motion and say, this needs to get done, and then just, say it got shot down. Come together, work together, get it done. Thank you.
Madam Chair. I would just like to answer that back in April, I wrote the RFQ to hire the new attorney, which was necessary for these negotiations as our other attorney had a conflict. That stuck on our agenda without consideration until June. We could not get a vote on that. 3 times in June, we were voted down, Mr. Liscars and I, to start negotiations on multiple contracts. We sat through the summer, and then we started in September. It's too late. That's the problem. It's not that anybody did anything wrong here, but we ran out of time because we started too late. And yes, there were solutions that were offered, but they weren't. If it's not the majority of this board, it cannot happen.
Hi everyone, I'm Gail McCarthy, 23 Barberry Street, and I realize the game started, so I'll be quick, I promise. I want to say, first of all, thank you, every one of you, for standing up and working really hard. We're back in the cheap seats, and we're just hoping you're going to get it done for us. I just want to bring up one unintended consequence, maybe, in terms of the landscape of the people who live in the town, and that is, as a real estate broker, I see it all the time, every day. People who are approaching me, worried about what's going to happen in town, asking me, really kind of making plans to move out, or if things don't work out, what's my house worth? I got to get out of town, or whatever. So saying we're losing, a lot of people are losing confidence, and we could be losing some really high quality parents, the ones who kind of lubricate the machines, the volunteers and the coaches, and those high quality people that we want in our town, who are really considering leaving, and also people who are looking for a place to raise their children. A lot of them are not considering Hooksett. So I see that every day. It's disheartening to me because my kids are here and we love it here, but it is happening. It's true. It really is affecting the landscape of the people who are moving in and out of town. So please, please, the distress that it's causing the kids with 8th graders and those of us who are just kind of nervous with 7th graders and below, we have to get to the point where we nail down this contract and turn it from conceptual to actual. Thank you.
Good evening, Carl Provencher. I live on Heritage Drive here in Hooksett. I have an 8th grade daughter, and you know, we're considering all the schools that are going to be available to us. I think one of the things that we're struggling with is every time we contact the school, we get an answer of, you know, we're trying to figure out how do we apply for that school, and they're saying you have to wait until things happen with the school board in Hooksett. I guess what I'm looking for is, can somebody from Hooksett, either from the superintendent's office, give us a process that we have to follow for each school district? So if we consider Bow, this is what you need to do for Bow. Consider Londonderry, this is what you need to do. Right now, it's like, it's kind of up in the air. It's very frustrating. We feel like we're being held hostage.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, to your point,
Excuse me, there's a line and you need to stand behind the woman.
Hey, Kyle. So to your point, actually the last meeting, I laid out a process, but we never got to it because the meeting got adjourned. So again, I think everybody here realizes what Phil's talking about. And again, I know obviously your 8th grade parents, everybody's very, very anxious. Obviously when an attorney's involved and you have negotiations going on, et cetera, it's tougher than it would seem, I guess I want to say. So we're obviously trying our best to get things done as fast as we can. But again, I put like a kind of like a draft process out there, and again, what Dave was saying earlier, we'll make some votes, etc. So we didn't get to it. I mean, we have a special meeting tomorrow, and we have a meeting on the 3rd. Out of Phil's list of things we need to do, that's first, is putting a process together for the kids for next year.
So is that going to happen through the schools, the 8th grade, or through the school, college school here, or is it going to just be through email?
Well, Phil. Oh, well, again, we don't have a process in place yet, but Phil had talked about having meetings with the 8th grade parents, and I'm sure obviously from a staff standpoint, he's involving guidance and everybody, and Matt and everybody else that needs to be involved. So again, part of the process will be to educate you about what the process is, but what we're shooting for again is no cherry picking and making it very simple. So as simple as filling out a sheet of paper. None of the having to get recommendations or any of that stuff is what we're targeting for.
I would just like to say that we had an opportunity this year. Up until this point, JCB was out there, but the Hooksett School Board could not become involved. We could not basically help students and parents to go through the system because we had a contract with Manchester. So we couldn't encourage students to leave Manchester. This year, we settled that. This year, we could have helped everybody through JCB. And I believe that that would have been the best method, because then we could have been talking about all of these things while you parents would be already probably assigned. But because we started into these MOUs, we've heard that schools are now not accepting people at this point, and unfortunately we're at a point where we can't control that. I would also like to add that we sent these MOU agreements to the schools without the board's approval. We never approved these. So as we're now getting Londonderry approving, there's language in there that concerns me. But what are we to do? Londonderry's already approved it. Now, if we're going to change it, we're going to have to send it back to Londonderry. I believe that the Hooksett School Board should have approved all of these MOUs as something we would vote for before we sent them out to these schools. Now we're at the last minute, and I'm not going to make a decision and vote for something that I don't believe in because we're at the last minute. We do have JCB, and I believe we should be exercising it.
Dr. Littlefield, could you?
Can I just do a quick follow-up?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So is there a date of when we're going to have that information that Mr. Denbaugh was talking about, of when we're going to be able to have the forms or the information from each school district?
Not that I know of, sir.
Kyle, we have a non-meeting with our attorney tomorrow to speak about things we can't speak about here that will involve all the schools we're talking about. So obviously, the quicker that we get those agreements locked down, which was David was just talking about, with the terms we need, our attorney's been working on them, then obviously those schools will know how many kids can go to those schools, and then the process can be put in place. But we
Dr.
can be working
Littlefield.
both at the same time, obviously.
Dr. Littlefield, could you clarify something for me regarding the MOUs? It was my understanding when you enter into an MOU agreement with a school district and we are the sending district, that the receiving district has to approve it first? Was that a correct understanding from our last meeting?
I don't think they have to. I think it's practice, because they are committing to something and we're not. But that's usually practice, that's how it happens.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would just like to say I don't think it makes a lot of sense to send something out to someone for approval if it hasn't been approved by the people that are sending it out. And now we're left, we had asked, John and I had asked for a face-to-face meeting with the attorney. We were told no. We had to send in our questions, and many of those came back, no, we don't think it needs to be changed. So when we look at the process being delayed, it's going to have to be delayed if these questions need to be answered. We should have started much, much earlier. Now we're at the end, and I can't vote for something that I see language in that does not agree with what our plan is.
Go ahead. You sure? Absolutely. Okay. Sorry. Pam Auger, Casey Drive. I know most of you, other than my friend Marge up here, have no idea who I am, but I want to give you a little bit of advice. I've lived in this town for nearly 30 years. I served on that school board for 5 years, several of which I was the chairman. I was the person standing on the stage many years ago who had people screaming at me from the audience, what part of no do you not understand that we do not want to build our own high school? In retrospect, if I can give you a little bit of advice, is when you're ready to start to present this information to the town, not the parents, the town, the voters. Be prepared, have meetings in advance. I don't want to talk about meetings that haven't been held yet. Going forward, have meetings prior to your general session so that people understand what they're voting on. This town traditionally supports education. They always have, and I think they always will if they understand what they're voting on. So give them the information. If they understand, they'll support you. If they don't understand, they will vote no. Okay? You have got to get the support of a lot more than just the people in this room, guys. Okay? So we're all supportive of education, and I truly, sincerely believe this town will always support education if you give them the information you need. Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up very quickly. There was a Pam who had asked about special education and if the funds would travel. I would like the good folks at Pinkerton to know that I have formally requested a tour with my son's team and was denied, and was told because of where I lived, he had to go to West. You have a beautiful special education department and the pastors who are very good advocates as well. Have represented Pinkerton, but I want you to know, Pinkerton, that I was denied having a tour and that my son has to go to West. I recognize other special education parents here, and if we ask our teams to go to Pinkerton, we could be denied. So again, Dr. Littlefield and the board, I would like the process streamlined so that each and every team, we don't have to fight as parents. And again, I've spent over $7,500 in advocates and neuropsych and private testing. I would just like the process streamlined, so if we ask to go to Pinkerton, hey team, hey high school coordinator, can we go to Pinkerton? They'll say sure, and let's go to Londonderry, and let's go to Bow, and let's go and compare the data. But I wasn't even allowed to go to Pinkerton. So again, I have speech and I have people working with my son from Pinkerton, and I would really like to go and tour. So please consider streamlining the process and not make parents have to fight, because special ed parents don't have JCE. We have to have a team decision. for special ed funding from Hooksett to be sent to an out-of-district placement. So we have to beg our team for our child's placement. And oftentimes we're told, it's where you live, it's where you go. And that shouldn't be how it should be individual consideration for every child. So if you'll please consider at least letting me and my son go to Pinkerton and tour and see what it has to offer. I hear it has Air Force ROTC as well as boat tech programs. And I want to be able to see it, but my spec ed team wouldn't let me. So I just want some good consideration given to the matter. And my son would really appreciate it. He is in 8th grade, and autistic kids have very high anxiety. And he's asking me daily, where am I going, where am I going, where am I going? And from what I understand, there's only very specific spots open for special education in each school. And once those spots are gone, they're gone. So thank you for your consideration. I appreciate it.
Hi, Bella Messina, Barbary Street. I'm a student at Pinkerton Academy this year, and I'm a freshman. Last year I went to Colley, and talking with all the other students that I went with, they went to Central, they went to Pembroke, they went to Londonderry, and some of them went with me to Pinkerton. And we're all having a great time. So I think that your plan would work really well, because no matter where you go, you'll do great. Whatever school you send us to, we'll follow. And that if you let us go to these schools that we choose, we will do our best if you give us the choice. So that's all we need is the opportunity. We'll take it. Run with it.
Hello, my name is Dylan Durazano. I'm currently an 8th grade student at Colley Middle School. I'm currently as well the vice president of Colley Middle School of the 8th grade. And so I've recently been on this wild goose chase to find a high school that I would really like to go to. So I've toured multiple high schools, and I've also shadowed 2 of the toured high schools. So I have toured Bow, Pinkerton, and Londonderry. I just recently have shadowed Londonderry and Pinkerton. I shadowed Londonderry today and Pinkerton last week, and I absolutely loved all 3 of them. But what stood out the most to me was overall, I chose Pinkerton, and I like Pinkerton the best. The reason why I love this school so much is it had all the teachers were very nice, and they really welcomed me into their classroom when I came in. And the campus and all around, they had many, many classes that I could attend, and I felt welcomed and fit perfectly into it. A couple of programs that I was really interested into was the video program and the business program, and they both had a very well put out program for that. And for that reason, I would like the school board to please see if we can get Pinkerton on that list. Thank you.
Dave Levesque, 29 Wall Road. Congratulations to both speakers. I don't think I could have ever gotten up here as a child, let alone as an adult. Well said. The last thing I have, I guess, to the board, as much as we have anxiety about the plan of where the kids are going, I think we have a pretty good conceptual framework to go on. But the side note that I hear is the unsure of this board. I've heard the board ask for us to demand the board to do things. I would like to personally demand the board to stop the infighting, stop claiming that you can use your First Amendment right to bash somebody. I demand that you find a way to make it happen so those 2 young children who just spoke here can have a chance at a good education. So I ask you today to look at each other, take a pledge that it's for those kids that you're up there for. Yes, we hear taxpayers, yes, we hear that piece. But at the end of the day, it's those two students that you're up there. We're all passionate in what we do. I know you're passionate at what you do. Take a pledge today to do right for each other and for the citizens of Hooksett.
I typically do wait to speak until I've heard a lot and taken it all in. And I really appreciate it, and I thank all of you for coming out tonight and expressing your questions and your worries and your concerns. This is not something new. This is my third year on the board. In March, my term is up, and this is something that I've been faced with since that first day, was what we're going to do about high school. There were angry parents that were very upset with Manchester, and that's what started the ball rolling. I had no idea what I was getting myself into at that point. These are extremely tough decisions, and I'm not taking them lightly by any means. However, I think all the cues, when you hear about the infighting, my votes are based on what our educational leaders have informed me about and what I have spoken to the lawyers in non-meeting. Unfortunately, I can't tell you some of those things, but those are what I'm basing my decisions on. So regardless of how votes come out, that's what I can tell you how I'm basing my votes on going forward. I also believe in this concept conceptually, and I support it, and I will continue to do that moving forward. I think there's some fine details that need to be worked out currently in each one of these. I think we can do them speedily, and I will continue to support that, and I will continue to try to do that personally, and hope to get an answer to this 8th grade class if they can make their decisions. I just wanted the public to understand where I stand and what I will be supporting and what I will be driving to do. I was hoping that this would be done on the 19th, and it looks like it could possibly be December 3rd. That is my goal for this 8th grade class and for all the future classes coming up. I support this conceptual idea of Pinkerton as our anchor school and the other districts as satellites. There will be some tough questions coming on in those 4 to 6 to 8 years going forward, and it may not make all of those parents happy. But I think that I am going to make a decision that will be in the best interest of the majority of the students here in Hooksett. And that's all I'd like to say.
Does anyone else want to speak at this time? Is there any other members of the community that wish to speak? Does anyone else have any questions for us? With there being no further questions, as it has been stated here, we do have school board emails. If you have questions for us, please, once you leave, you get home, you talk to your spouse, you talk to your neighbor, something comes up, please reach out to us. We have an email system that you can email all of us if you have specific questions on what any one of us said individually. We have individual emails, they are on the website. We do have a non-meeting tomorrow with our attorney, and we also have a special meeting tomorrow at 6:30, and then we reconvene at a regular meeting on December 3rd at 6:30. We also, our meetings, for those of you who want to yell and holler at your computers, we do live stream most meetings. Sometimes the camera can be off, and as soon as we realize it, we put it back, and that is another opportunity for you to observe what is going on. After the live stream, it is loaded up the next day, and we will take many of the suggestions that you made tonight on how for us to better communicate with you seriously, and we will look into that. Personally, as a school board member, there is nothing that is more important to me than the education of our high school students and making the right decisions for this community. It is unfortunately at times become a full-time job. It is something I spend hours every day working on, researching on. It is not something that I take lightly. As the chair of the school board, I am to stay as neutral as I can, so a lot of times I did not answer your individual questions. It doesn't mean I didn't hear you, it doesn't mean I didn't write them down, and it doesn't mean that it won't be something on our agenda for us to look at. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood. I wasn't interjecting or countering what people said, because I wanted to make sure I was listening to what the community was saying. Thank you very much for coming this evening, and we look forward to seeing you at future meetings. Thank you very much.
Can I, before we adjourn,
I guess Bill wants to talk now.
One thing, so there had been information in the paper about an open house at Pinkerton. I wonder if we want to talk about the fact, how we wanted to communicate that, whether we use the email and or send a flyer home with the kids tomorrow, because obviously it's Monday and it's a short time frame. I wanted to try to address that real quick.
You could address. Dr. Littlefield, we have the ability to provide the community, the 8th grade students with information regarding the open house that was presented to us by Pinkerton. Is that something that could go home tomorrow, or have an email that pushes out to our 8th grade parents?
I would certainly carry out the will of the board if that's what you want done. Do you have enough of these to go home?
I believe that if I don't, I will by tomorrow morning. We had some, if I knew someone was an 8th grade parent, I provided it to them this evening, but not everyone is here.
That's what the board would like. Yeah, send those home tomorrow.
So could we do all 3 schools and not just the 8th graders? Are they ready for an open house where we could send it out to anybody who's interested in going? Like 10?
That would depend on the
So I'd like to make a motion that we announce the open house for Pinkerton for the college grades 6, 7, and 8.
You can just hold your conversation for just a minute. We're trying to make a motion up here. Excuse me.
Excuse me, folks, can we keep the conversation down, please? Thank you.
We're almost finished.
So I'll restate it. I'd like to make a motion that we communicate via email to the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade parents, as well as possibly send a flyer home with the kids tomorrow for the open house at Pinkerton on Monday night.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, I'm a little bit concerned that our parents that are maybe not following as closely as some of these people, are they going to think that this is an open option to them? Because right now, we can't answer that question. I don't know what the flyer says. Does it indicate in any way that there's an opportunity for them that we don't have?
David, what do you mean by opportunity that we don't have?
Well, my point, Phil, is someone said tonight they thought that Pinkerton was a done deal. I just don't want this to be seen by parents as it is, and they go down there with the thought that we have a pathway for them, other than the normal process.
I think we're working in that direction, and I think there's nothing wrong with folks actually getting an open house and being able to see the school that haven't been there yet.
I'm fine. Excuse me, I'm fine with this. Anybody else want to look at it?
It was just quick.
Sheila Shamel, 9 Maple Street. I think I can answer that question as far as Pinkerton. We actually are not in the Hooksett School District. We are, but we're not for 8th grade. And we went to Pinkerton and we were told we could still apply because yearly they will still accept a handful of kids out of district. And within 2 days we got a letter back after submission of our admission packet stating that they would let us know by early December.
Okay, thank you.
So you still can go to the open house, you can still apply to Pinkerton, and they will let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you very much.
All those in favor of Mr. Denbo's email, please, Mr. Denbo's motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Is there any more questions for us this evening? Okay. I will adjourn this meeting at 9:27. If I'm off by a minute, I'm sorry, my glasses aren't that good.
Motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 may call it, it's a good information to figure out whether or not we are in the school, so we're not, you know, yeah.